Hi guys, I hope you are doing well. In this video, I'm going to clarify a lot of questions that you may have about EDITO. EDITO is a French textbook which helps us to enhance our vocabulary on wide range of topics when we are learning French. For instance, if you want to explain what do you do for living, if you want to talk about your background, where do you live, about your family, and topics in general, for instance, environment, food consumption habits, social media, etc. Edito is an amazing book. It has textbooks by level from A1 to C2. So depending on your level, you can pick a book and you can start reading it. In each book, there are 12 chapters and you will see similar set of topics being repeated in different levels as well. If you are at A1 level and in Edito A1, you read about clothes. Then in Edito A2 also you would find a similar chapter, but this time vocabulary is going to be a little bit advanced. So I really like this book because it introduces us to vocabulary based on our level gradually, which makes it very easy for learners to get comfortable with vocabulary with time. Now, if you're wondering when you should actually start using Edito, since this book is 100% in French, I recommend that you should spend some time on grammar, at least couple of months, get comfortable with it, do some reading, writing, listening and speaking also in parallel, little bit based on your level. And once you have done grammar to some extent for say couple of months, then you can pick Edito A1 and you can start going through it, because then you would be able to understand what is there in the book. Now, the second most general question that I've heard is, can we do Edito alone or do we need to do it with a friend or a teacher? Now, based on my experience, I truly believe that you have to do it with somebody else, because there are a lot of speaking exercises. You will have to interact with somebody. If you want to get the most out of this book, you need to have a speaking partner. If you can work with a teacher, that is even better, because teacher can guide you through and teacher can correct your mistakes also. So that would be best if you can work with a teacher or maybe probably with a friend. But if you are someone who wants to work on this book on your own, at least A1, and then for A2, B1 and B2, probably you would want to work with somebody else or a teacher, then I'm going to walk you through one unit and I'm going to explain what was my approach when I read this book. Although I did it with my teacher, but I can tell you my strategy, and probably that would help you to get the most out of this book. So without a further ado, let's get started. So this is unit 1 of Edito A2. Now, whenever I start a new unit, my approach was always to just observe the first page keenly, look at the image, what do I have on it, and also the name of the chapter, to get the basic understanding of what am I going to read in this particular topic. So as you see, the topic is C'est la vie. So probably they are going to talk about the life in general, where do you come from. And if I look at the image now, I see there are a lot of people moving on the road. Probably they are going to work, and then there is one person in blue clothes who has provided some introduction about himself. So my first approach would be to try and explain what I see in French. So I would use white space on the page to write down my thoughts and about what do I see on this image. So for instance, I'll say things like Je vois beaucoup de personnes sur la route. Ils vont au bureau. Presque tout le monde porte des vêtements formels. Chaque personne est unique et différente des autres. L'homme qui porte la soute bleue, il s'appelle Albert Dupont. Il est né à Paris et il est grand. Je vois aussi un chien qui va quelque part. So things like that, I would probably write these down on the white space. And when I speak with my speaking partner or with my teacher, I would use these ideas to describe this image. And then probably we can turn around the table and this time my friend can explain this image. So this used to be my first step always. Then I'll also see some of these objectives written over here. That would also give me better idea about what the chapter is going to be about. Now, on the first page, I see one image. So the first exercise is going to be comprehension oral. So I'm going to listen to one audio, and then based on that, I have to answer some questions. So before I even jump onto that, my first focus would again be to observe this image keenly. What do I see? What these people are doing, etc. And then I'll look at some questions. So the first question itself is asking about what do you see, what these people are doing, where are they. So I would have already thought about that when I look at the image keenly, and then I would try to explain it in French itself. That's why it's important to have a speaking partner, because you can speak to your friend, you can tell your friend, this is what I see here, what is it that you see here on this image. So you can talk to each other, you can maybe correct your mistakes based on your understanding. And then you would hear this audio 3 times, and then you'll have different set of questions to answer. So in the first question, these people in this image will talk about where they were born. Then in the second audio, each one of these people will talk about where they stayed during their life. Then in the third audio, there is a question which you have to answer. Now next you'll see there is a speaking exercise wherein you have to talk about yourself. Where do you come from? Where did you grow up? Have you always lived in the same city? Now that you have heard about the introduction of all these 4 people individually, you might have already heard about some verbs that they have used while they spoke about themselves, and also the type of vocabulary that they have used. Now it's an opportunity for you to describe yourself while making use of the similar type of vocabulary and verbs that these people have used. So use the white space on this paper to write down those verbs and vocabulary, so that when you talk about yourself in production oral activity, you can leverage those verbs and vocabulary. Then next exercise is production écrite, in which you have to present somebody else. Now you have to present a second member, it could be your family member or a friend, and you have to basically talk about all those things. And you can, in this exercise also, you can leverage all the vocabulary and verbs that you have already learned in the first exercise on this paper. And on the right hand side, this yellow box that you see, it has also kind of summarized all the kind of verbs and vocabulary and sentence formation that you can use when you introduce yourself or a second person. So for instance, if you want to talk about where did you born, you can say je suis né à. Where do you come from? Je viens de. Where did you pass your childhood? J'ai passé mon enfance. I think this is exactly why it is important to have a speaking partner, because you can talk to each other, you can do these activities, and probably it would, also add some enthusiasm to work on these exercises with somebody else, because if you were to do it alone, you probably won't find it very interesting. Now on the second page, you see a text in which you'll read about one very famous actor. So they have explained where this actor was born, where has he spent his life, where did he grow up, and what does he do for living now, what are the other passions that he follows. So very similar thing that we have done on page 1, but this time you're going to read a text. So this is comprehension écrite, which is reading exercise. After reading this text, there are some questions which you need to answer, and then there is another production oral activity here, wherein you would be asked to explain if you have any passion, and you have to talk about it. On the yellow box, you will see the summary, or you will see some suggestions which you can use when you do these speaking and writing exercises on the similar type of topic. So when you talk about your passion, you can say things like j'adore, je m'intéresse à, je suis amateur de. Then there is another exercise where you'll watch a video about a lady who follows one specific sports. You can call it a passion also, and then you have to answer some of these questions. So now if you look at it on page number 1, you have learned how to introduce yourself or a second person using some examples which are written over here in a yellow box, or you may also write down some additional verbs or vocabulary that you have learned. You can use white space for that. And then on the second page, you have learned about how to explain your passion with the help of some sentences which are written on the yellow box. So this is how EDITO is designed. Now on the third page, you're going to find some grammar exercises. I really like this part about EDITO. It doesn't only introduce you to vocabulary on different topics, but it also helps you to revise your grammar. And if you have not understood a particular grammar rule, there would be some explanation provided in the book itself, followed by some exercises. Now on this page, you can see one exercise on passé composé. First, you'll read through different sentences and you have to identify any differences in these different sentences. Now in the first sentence you see Omar si e ne, then in the second one il s'est inscrit, then in the third one il a joué. So if you notice in the first one, in passé composé form we are using être because we are talking about verb n'être, and n'être is a verb of movement. That's why we are using être rather than avoir for passé composé. Then in the second statement, again we are using il s'est inscrit, which is verb pronominal, because s'inscrire is a pronominal verb. So in this case also in passé composé form we use être rather than avoir. While in the third statement, il a joué, we are using normal avoir form for passé composé. And then you will see explanation, you will see some further information on each of these three forms, followed by some exercises to do. Now, everything that you have learned so far in the chapter, which includes how to introduce yourself, how to introduce the second person, how to talk about your passions, how to talk about your family, etc., where were you born, where did you grow up. For all of those things, next page will have a list of vocabulary for all the things that you have learned so far. But on this page, now you will be introduced with some additional vocabulary which you may or may not have noticed on the previous pages. So now you see here there's a list of vocabulary, and then there are some exercises that you need to do by leveraging the vocabulary that you see on this page, followed by one production oral activity here, wherein you need to describe if you play any of these sports. And since we have already spoken about passion, you now know what type of vocabulary or verbs you need to use when you talk about a particular passion. Yeah, so this is how EDITO is structured. We have just seen one part of this chapter. There are two more parts which are designed in a very similar way. So you will be introduced with one topic and then another topic, followed by one small grammar exercise, and then there would be one page on vocabulary, followed by some exercises. Now, if you have realized, in one chapter itself, you get the opportunity to practice all four aspects of French, which means reading, listening, writing, and speaking. But you can leverage all of these activities to have as much conversation as possible with your speaking partner. So, for instance, if you have read a text, you can describe it to your friend. If you have heard a conversation, you can describe it to your friend. And if you have to do a writing exercise, you can write it down, but you can also try and explain it to your friend in speaking. So basically, you get tons of opportunities to have conversation when you do EDITO, and that is exactly why it is recommended to have a speaking partner or a teacher when you do EDITO. In my case, I did EDITO A1 in detail with my teacher because it was the first time I was approaching this book and I had no idea how to go about it, and I didn't want to take any chances and lose any time, so I asked her to work with me on A1. I did each chapter. I think each chapter took me about 3 classes to complete it, but it was so much fun. Only Edito A1 took me about 2.5 months to complete because I dedicated too much time on it because I wanted to do it properly. But once I was done with A1, A2 didn't take me long. I was able to do it very quickly on my own, I think in just few weeks. Then I did Edito B1 and B2 also on my own. I actually only did listening exercises. I did A2, B1 and B2 at a faster pace because I was already doing some topic specific vocabulary with my teacher, and I had also slowly moved to doing exam specific preparation. So my vocabulary was already at B1 level. But otherwise, for everybody, I suggest to do at least till B1 in depth. Give it some time, don't rush into it because all the vocabulary and all the verbs that you're going to learn in these 3 books are going to be extremely helpful later on. If I were to give you 2 advice to get the most out of these books, advice number 1 would be to identify new verbs and vocabulary that you have learned on every page and write it down on the white space that you have on the paper. And number 2 would be to find a speaking partner or a teacher because that is essential to make this exercise fun. Otherwise, I feel that you would probably not even complete a book or maybe take months to complete one book because you would not feel very enthusiastic about doing it all alone. In the description box below, you would be able to download Edito A1, A2, B1 and B2, and you can start working on these as per your level. For listening part, you're going to get a CD if you decide to buy a hard copy, but otherwise you don't need it, because on YouTube, if you just type EDITO A1 listening exercises, you are going to find all the audio recordings. So you can actually use YouTube. You don't really need that CD. All right, so I have tried to cover everything that I knew about EDITO. But if you have any additional questions, please let me know in the comment section below and I'll get back to you. Take care. Bye.